events, as you know, every few months. And just a little bit about EMBCA and some of the events that will be coming up before we start our panel discussion. I'd like to thank, first of all, our sponsors for the evening. They always do a great job, and it's part of the reason why the event is cost-effective, which we try to do. The event, of course, is the most popular event, is always this particular event, the Development, Design, and Construction panel discussion that we have. And for those of you who haven't been here before, just to describe the panel discussion a little bit. It's a discussion of people getting together and basically chatting with each other. You are the audience, and you're just listening into a conversation. There's no set questions. The event is unscripted, so if we botch up, don't worry about it. It's unscripted, but it makes it a little bit unique in that particular fashion because it's unscripted. Again, thank you for coming. And these events are part of a series that we have every few months. The reason for the event is just to talk to leaders in the industry from different aspects of the industry and just get their feedback in terms of what's going on, what's the latest, what's happening right now. And as you know, our particular industry is something that changes radically sometimes. And every few months, it's always great to get together because all of us in the industry are always asking those around us, what's going on? So I'd like to introduce the panel, and we'll start with John Katsimatidis. So John, and what do you see happening in the near future and in the long-term future? And we'll come back to it later also.
Well, you know, Brooklyn is hot, and some people are saying there's a little bit of slow up. We haven't seen much of a slow up. We're renting up like no tomorrow. We're looking at other projects in Brooklyn. We're looking at Coney Island. We have not pressed the button on Coney Island yet, but we're seriously looking at it. We're also looking at things in Florida, like I've said we will. And there are some great deals in Florida. And you have to balance your portfolio between costs and risks, and it's a smart thing to do.
You have done a very spectacular job on Myrtle Avenue, actually, and just to watch it is just like almost classical development, where you took an undeveloped area and, in a sense, created a whole community and a critical mass. Can you just describe some of the buildings that you built on Myrtle and off of Flatbush?
Well, when the world was coming to an end, you know, it was going to be like 1,200,000 square feet. And we were going to start the project in 2009, and the world was coming to an end in 2009. So instead of building the whole thing at the same time, we decided to stagger the project. Yes. We first built a moderate-sized building, Andrea. Then we built about, I forget what it was, 11 or 12 stories.
Yes.
And then we built the Giovanni. You know, my son's name is John, but we didn't want to call it the John. So we gave it a little bit of an Italian name, Giovanni, and that's, I believe, 22 stories, 225 apartments. Then we built the Margot, another 22 stories, 225 apartments. And then we were going to build a 40-story tower, and the city started to play games with us.
In terms of the heights, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be it was supposed to be 40 stories, and we needed a couple of things from the city, and they were playing hardball. And so, you know what we told the city? We told them. So we only built 32 or 33 stories, and we're going to make more profit on it than if we would have built 40 stories. And it's a great development right across the street from Metrotech. And I think the key is 3 different subway stations, the Long Island Railroad, so it has transportation. People live there, they're able to get around. We created our own police force, our own security force, because there was no problems. But my mother had a expression, "Rola Victor Kakol." So just in case they were thinking of problems, we said, I want our own police force there, dawn to dusk. And we've never had any problems, and you just have to, it's a great community, and it's 10 minutes away from Manhattan.
For those who don't know Gene Kaufman, as I mentioned to some people earlier, when it comes to, he's done a lot of different building types, but when it comes to hotels, I think if you add up all the architects who have built hotels in the city, they haven't done as much as Gene Kaufman. So Gene, if you can, tell us a little bit about the portfolio, the current portfolio, and what do you see happening in particular, I mean, discuss the other projects also, but in particular the hospitality end of it.
Well, the hospitality end continues to be extremely active. There's been a lot of discussion about the market softening, and numerically that's true, but to a relatively small extent. Given the delivery time on projects, people are looking forward to see what's going to happen because there's a perceived glut of hotel rooms now. And that seems to be eroding very quickly. We opened up actually our largest hotel last month, 612 rooms, and we're at 90% occupancy in 30 days. So that's not a soft market. I have 12 hotels in construction right now, and we're going to break ground for 6 more in the next 30 days. So it's still very active.
How many hotels have you actually designed, Jim?
We've designed about 90, but 55 are open and operating in Manhattan today.
And how do you see, this is going a little bit off, it's unscripted so it doesn't matter. How do you see the financing of hotels right now? Is that problematic? Are you getting a queasy feeling with some of the developers or what?
No, there's 4 words, Bank of the Ozarks. They've been financing the vast majority of the projects in the last period. That being said, there's a lot of non-bank money that's available just at higher numbers, and some people are balking at that and some people are doing it.
Peter Getz is referred to as the dean of construction lawyers. I've certainly known him many years. He also, John, flies a plane. He's been flying for a number of years. And Peter is going to have a great organization. He'll tell us about it in a second, but they're also going to have their 50th year anniversary, I think, as an organization in about a week.
Correct.
Please say something.
In around 50 years, you mind if I stand, because I like to see the audience.
Go ahead, please.
All right. First of all, I just wanted to, I'm a construction attorney, and you know, how do you become a construction attorney? Well, I just want to start with a very short story. After I graduated law school, as the bio says, I was a civil engineer from RPI. I decided I wanted to become a construction lawyer. And the only construction lawyer in town at that time was a very smart attorney named Max E. Greenberg. And I wangled an interview with him. And after about a half an hour of speaking with him, he said to me, my experience is that engineers don't make very good lawyers. So I think I'm cooked, but I had to come back fast. And I said, Mr. Greenberg, you have nothing to worry about. I'm not a very good engineer. And he hired me. So on that note, that's how I got into the construction business. I think that if you just look around and you want to know from a construction lawyer's viewpoint, what is the state of construction and design in New York City, my only comment is that all I see are cranes and lawsuits.
And you love them.
So that's a commentary that I can make. I don't want to take up all the time, but if you do any public works construction, you should be well aware that that dreadful, horrendous clause in all the city contracts, the no damage for delay, has been excised. And that is going to make a tremendous difference, a positive difference for the city of New York and the prices that they get on bidding, because contractors before had to impact into their bid cost what it was going to cost them for delays that were inevitable working for the city of New York and the various departments thereof. So when they took that out, the bids are coming down, and rightfully so. So it was a good economic, move, and it was a good move for the contractors, because they can now be compensated for the delays that they do incur by reason of the city's actions or omissions.
Very good, Peter. We always have a developer, we always have an architect, we always have a construction manager. And in many cases, we have someone from the finance industry, from the banking industry. Roy Chen, who's at TD Bank, is also here. He's been on a panel before. I thought it would be interesting on this particular panel to also have a lawyer. Even though in the construction industry, we basically hate lawyers. Sorry. We don't like to get involved with lawyers at all. As a matter of fact, we hate them.
We hate each other.
Yes. Even though my wife is a lawyer, I don't hate her. I don't hate you, obviously. And my son is an attorney. We are fortunate also to have Frank Siami, and one of the things that stands out with Frank, and Frank will go into the various types of projects they do and what's happening right now with the organization, but one thing that caught my eye when I was reading some of the material that was on the internet was Frank has done like 1,000 projects, which I found to be very interesting, that someone would even mention that, or someone would even do 1,000 projects. So if you can, Frank, did you know it was on the internet?
No.
Yeah, 1,000 projects. So tell us a little bit about yourself, the organization, what you guys are doing.
Well, we are construction managers. I have a degree in architecture, but I knew early on I was not the next Frank Lloyd Wright, the next Gene Kaufman. I was intimidated by the great designers, but I do have high regard for architecture and great design. And I think our firm really has sort of just moved in the direction of doing very complicated, highly detailed architectural projects. And if there's anything that maybe I contribute to the field of architecture, or our firm does, it's a real passion for executing the architect's design. It's a simple business form. The owner hires a great architect because they want a great building. If we could somehow deliver that building on budget for a good price, it's a win-win. And that's really what we've gotten involved with doing. And it's really great. There are many different projects, residential, high-end residential, hotels, many institutional projects, museums, but they all have that common thread of great design. And it's really great to see what's happened in the last 10, 15 years in terms of the different computer programs that you have with BIM and Revit and all these new programs that are coming out, which are allowing architects to really do great buildings and the contractors to actually build them in a way that they could fit without a lot of different change orders. And that's what we're really focused on. How do we just take the architectural drawings, the construction manager, and fill that gap that exists? And we're actually finding a niche business where these people are so good at computers, they can really fill the gaps and make sure the jobs run on time and to high quality.
Well, one of the jobs that I was watching when I was teaching at Cooper Union was the job that you were doing at Astor Place.
Yeah.
And it was always very interesting to see the development. And as a matter of fact, the students would always ask, what's happening now, what's going on, with the project. And our architects in general, a lot of them, I find a lot of them, when they finish architectural school, are actually more and more going into the construction area. And many large CMs, in fact, hire architects, and not only architects, but also engineers. We're going to start to talk about a little bit about the development process. And John, on the development process, one of the issues that comes up with everyone is the financing of a project. Can you touch base on the financing, and what do you see, for example, banks asking now that's a little bit different than maybe a year or two ago? Or do you see any change at all on the financing side?
Well, I mean, we haven't seen that many changes, other than the fact that everybody's being a little bit more careful.
Yes.
You have rising interest rates, but if you look at the T-bills after the last rate increase, they're down. So the market is now predicting that the rates are not going to continue to go up. I think that everybody has to be a little cautious, and you can't buy it for retail and build for retail, and just you have to be a little extra cautious, and I think the banks are going to be a little bit extra cautious.
On the equity side, are you seeing the banks, wanting a larger percentage of equity before they lend, or what's the thought on that?
We always went for larger equity so we could borrow at lower interest rates.
Okay,
So
you did
for
a
us, it
strategic.
didn't matter.
Yeah, so you did on a strategic
Yeah.
basis.
But I don't think you'll be able to do deals at very low equity like some of the people want to rush in. I know we're selling a couple of buildings, and the people we're selling them to are having difficulty getting financing.
To raising the money. I mean, you're in a different position than
Yeah.
most of these other people, certainly.
When you have John's balance sheet, it's easy.
Well,
But
what do you
I'm
find? What do you find?
No, what we're finding is that banks are really reluctant to lend on condominiums that are selling for more than $2,000 a foot. And even under $2,000 a foot, it's not unusual to just get 50% loan to value. And that's pretty low. We're seeing, talking to our clients, that the banks are making it a little more difficult in the high-end residential market.
So in many cases, in other words, the clients that have projects that they're asking you to put together pricing structures, et cetera, some of them maybe have been delayed because of some of these financing issues?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I hope I'm wrong, but I do think that there may just be an overbuilding of a lot of the condominiums. There may be some difficulty in selling them at the prices that were pro forma a year or two ago.
Yeah, we've had these discussions also on these panel discussions, and in particular as it relates to the condo market, what was expressed in other panel discussions, for example, especially on the very high end, the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 square foot. And the developers were basically saying that there's a limited amount of people that have that kind of money. In other words, if you're having something obviously that's under $2,000 a foot, that's one set of circumstances. You have a bigger portfolio of people, let's say, who can buy these things. But on the upper end, how many $50 million, $40 million apartments are people going to buy? On the financing side, Gene, are the developers who are planning hotels having these type of issues?
They are. I think that what's happened is the banks are concerned about the rug being pulled out from under the market. And there's no evidence that that's happening, but the lenders have basically turned the spigot almost completely to closed. And so the projects that make the most sense, that get the best brands, the best locations, the highest equity, the best track record from a developer, those are the projects that are going ahead. And other projects are proceeding either with money at higher rates, and mezz financing, or people come together and forming partnerships, or people who are building, in some cases, for cash.
So are you finding, for example, because we know that there's a lot of money from abroad, okay, a lot of money that basically wants to come into New York. Some of it maybe has shrunk, but certainly, Chinese money that we've been talking about in the past, not so much now, Russian money, all the rest of that. Are you finding still that people are coming into this marketplace? Or John, are people coming to you? Let's say let's do some joint ventures or anything from the foreign markets.
As a matter of fact, we've never needed any, but they are starting to come. Some people from Europe.
From Europe.
that want to escape their areas, and they look at New York. Look, New York is the last hurrah. I mean, New York is the capital of the world.
Right.
If something happens to New York, there is no world. So I think the money is flowing to New York. The South American money was flowing to Florida. But now you got some new restrictions on where the Fed is asking where the money is coming from.
Yes.
So I think that's, I don't know if you found that,
Yeah, I think the money is coming from a lot of sources, a lot of different locations. And always open the door for the project. There are these restrictions, and there are concerns that banks are not always lending, even if the equity position is what they're asking for.
Peter, let's talk about the legal aspects of that. Have you found some issues with that?
Well, no, no more than any other type of financing, but I do know that we have definitely seen a trend in our office that the Chinese are, the individuals, not the corporations or anything, the Chinese are coming in droves and buying up the new condos. They have no interest in anything that's not brand new. But they are buying the units. They're not developing. They're not going in and becoming developers. But they are certainly buying up the product that the developers are selling in these high-rises
Well,
on a grand scale.
Certainly, we've seen, and I've seen actually with some clients, the lending institutions, for example, the Bank of China, okay, has done a lot of lending for some major projects. And what you're talking about, Peter, is the people who, in many cases, have gotten great wealth in other countries. In China, let's say, in particular, in some cases, because they have many multimillionaires. And in those cases are people who are just trying to get some of their assets out of the country and establish some other roots. I mean, we find that, for example, when we're talking about financing, where among the financing that some developers use is what we call EB5 financing, which has to do with immigration funds. And that has become actually a big source of funding for some of the projects.
By the way, all of the people who are buying the condos in the $2 to $3 million range that are from China are buying it for cash, all cash.
Well, there's no doubt about it. By the way, if you have, like you say, brand new stuff, $2, $3 million, $4 million, there's a host of people who will come actually to buy that type of product.
Great product.
But they also combine it with certain other characteristics. In other words, among the characteristics is they want to buy in the best possible place, and sometimes the $2,000 or what have you doesn't work. Frank, you had mentioned the concept of overbuilding, okay, and a concern in terms of the marketplace. Can you discuss this a little bit? Because, for example, John is building in Brooklyn, and the area that we're talking about has thousands of units actually coming online. But John's buildings are renting up, I think, very well. And as a matter of fact, they've done remarkably in this particular market. You want to discuss a little bit about the overbuilding?
Well, no, I do think there's always going to be a market for rental buildings, and that's good to hear that they're renting. I just think I'm hearing as all the condominiums are coming onto the market, even the rentals are beginning to soften with more free rent, more concessions to try and rent up their buildings. But when you look at all those cranes, I want to ask you a question after this. There are so many.
You mean the cash?
Yeah, the cranes.
The cash.
When you see all these cranes and you see all these buildings coming onto the market, it just seems to be that there are a lot of them. Just personal experience selling a condo, one of the brokers said, look, if you really want to sell on the Upper East Side, you better be prepared to take a 25–30% discount on what you're selling in the older buildings. If that's a trend, it's going to be an issue. So it just from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing in terms of projects that aren't starting, there seems to be a concern that there may be some overbuilding. Again, I hope I'm wrong. But did you see, is there a correlation between more cranes and more lawsuits?
Of course. I mean,
Okay.
that's a given.
Yeah.
I'm on a high floor in my, at One Penn Plaza, which we've been there for 33 years. And I look out and I can plot the future of my firm by counting the cranes that are on the skyline that I see. I'm serious. You can make that bet.
Scary.
Yep.
Well, one of the things that I think is very interesting, and it relates back to what you were talking about, Frank, is certain areas, in fact, there's the perception that there's overbuilding. For example, downtown Brooklyn, there's a perception and a reality, basically, of a lot of units that are, coming into the market. So what we've seen, for example, in the permits that people pull, we've seen a shift, because actually Brooklyn, in many cases, in terms of units, was leading the other boroughs in terms of number of units, let's say, over the last 3 or 4 years. Over Manhattan, obviously, because land is more expensive and there's less units being built. But now there seems to be a trend in the last year of actually going into the Bronx, where actually there's development taking place in the Bronx, and the Bronx in the last year, for example, has had more permits being pulled. And that probably has to do with a link of people having perceptions of how things are. In addition to the fact that, land values, I think, in the Bronx are less than they are, for example, in Brooklyn. John, on the commercial side, do you see commercial development being soft, or a need for it, or what's your thought about commercial, even in the buildings that you're building, for example, that are multi-use type buildings?
Retail is pulling back a little bit. The numbers that some of the landlords want for retail is not happening as easy. The drugstores have pulled back. I understand that Walgreens or Duane Reade is going to be closing as many as 30 to 60 stores in the next 90 days. So what does that mean? I mean, Walgreens, all the drugstores, Rite Aid is being bought out. So the supermarkets, they all went bankrupt. I mean, I think I bought them all. I don't know if there's any left. You know why? Retail is okay if you know how to be a tough survivor. People that never felt being in survival school are not going to survive.
It's a low margin.
Yeah, the margins are being squeezed, items are going up. I'll give you an example. When minimum wage went up, January 1st, I actually went to figure out how much that's costing us. And a small company that Prestige is, because Prestige is a small company, it's going to cost them $3 million a year. And the governor Cuomo said, oh, minimum wage up. And that's $3 million just for this year, not considering it's going to go from 11 to 13 to 14 to 15, or wherever it goes. The costs are rising, healthcare is rising, rents are rising. So the ability for retailers to survive, they're going to survive only if they're smart and they're sharp and they know how to survive. Otherwise, they're gone. I mean, my favorite restaurant, Le Cirque and Circo, just filed bankruptcy here last week.
Gene, let's talk about the hotel market, and in terms of where hotels are being built, what's the strategies that some people are using? What are those markets all about?
I think what's happened in the hotel field is it's basically moved to stay where the land prices make the development possible. And part of that's driven by zoning, areas where residential is not permitted. Part of that's driven by areas that have not seen the kind of economic activity that we saw the last couple of years were much quieter, and they gave an opportunity to invest. So I have, I think, 6 hotels in the West 30s now that are in construction. This is an area where there were really no hotels.
Well, why the 30s? What's your thought on that? Why are they all around that area?
Well, you know, after the Hudson Yards rezoning, there were a lot of opportunities for residential. Hotels were sort of priced out of that market, and they moved into the garment center and to some other areas where there really weren't other viable competitors. And actually, geographically, it's a fantastic location because you're a very short walk to Times Square. And we were able to flag some of those as Times Square properties, and you're a short walk to a lot of other midtown locations. But you're not like right in that sort of very high-powered nexus where prices are very high on some of the avenues like 5th and 6th Avenue. And I think one thing that we tend to forget as New Yorkers, and John talked about this, about what a special place this is, we tend to forget that some of the things that we think of as being everyday and that we kind of look down on, people find very interesting. So people came in, and this area is a little gritty. It has a mix of things, including some things that are not particularly desirable, and people find that to be part of that New York experience for their visit. And ironically, some of the drawbacks turned out to be advantages.
What size does a hotel want to be? In other words, what's the relative size that makes sense? What's the smallest, the largest, and really the sweet spot, if you will, of hotels?
So the answer to that today is actually yes, because once upon a time when I started to do these, hotels that were being done were too large, and if it wasn't full service, it wasn't being built. And these hotels were not succeeding, and they were not being built. And what I ended up doing was trying to find out a formula for sort of a compact, small, limited service hotel, 150 rooms, and I built many of these. But it turned out that, in fact, there was sort of an end to that kind of market, and there were a lot of other markets that weren't being served. And so we started doing smaller boutique hotels, and then we started doing larger hotels, and then we started doing projects where we would divide a property into 2 and 3 properties, and we would do side-by-side hotels, or vertically stacked hotels, or side-by-side hotels, just so the key count didn't get too big. But now we're actually doing some big hotels. So I mentioned 612 rooms that we opened. It's the largest hotel I've done, and you can hardly get a room there now, actually. We had to buy back some rooms to do some sound testing because they were booked. I think that what we found is that there's a lot of diversity in the market. And also another thing that turned out not to be true is when Marriott bought Starwood in a multi-billion-dollar deal, people said, well, there won't be any competition because it's Marriott against Marriott, because they have 40 brands right now. And in fact, we're doing more projects that are former Starwood and now Marriott brands than ever before, and more Marriott products. So I think that a lot of things that people assume that there was sort of a limit to what could happen turned out not to be the case.
Frank, you do a variety of projects, and a lot of the projects you do are also related more to the, I guess, the arts and culture and all that. Do they have any special financing issues, those type of projects?
No, they usually there could be one major donor that will step up to the plate and put in the seed money.
I see.
At the Culture Shed, I mean, they've raised over $300 million, and that's a new institution in Hudson Yards.
Right.
Actually, it's not the Culture Shed, it's the Shed. We get fined $10 every time we say Culture Shed. But the Shed at Hudson Yards had no real trouble raising money. You know, there's this real upper high end and low end in the city. I mean, we're doing a $70 million single family residence in the West Village, which is pretty extraordinary, and another $45 million project.
How many square feet are we talking about for that?
That one is 40,000 square feet, 30,000 square feet for the main residence, and then a 4-story building adjacent to it for the children of the owners. But it's you know, it's high end, very, very detailed. It's very similar to museums. So there's a synergy there. And again, you need that BIM and you need that Revit to make everything put together. So there's this mix of units. And even the high-end condominiums in Lake Street that we did sold very well. They had great prices. They hit the market well. So there's a lot of diversity. But the cultural institutions, whether it be universities, Columbia University raised a lot of money, Princeton University is having no trouble raising money, the Shed, other museums. So that remains very strong, and fortunately is a good source of work for us.
Peter, you had mentioned the concept of delays and what was taking place, and public works prices coming down on the basis of some of those particular changes. In terms of the public works, is that purely relates to public works, correct? You don't have these type of issues that much because some of the CM contracts, specifically, I guess Frank excludes some of these delay claims, although sometimes the contractors put you in a position where you have to, make adjustments for that. But do you find that also serious claims, delay type claims on the private work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a no damage for delay clause in his contract.
No,
But most of the
large CMs have that.
the developers, not the CMs so much. It's not passed on to the subcontractor. Most of the CMs and general contractors are pretty conscionable in what they put into their contracts.
Right.
But the owner contracts, giving it to the CMs or general contractors, they still have many onerous clauses, including the no damage for delay.
Yeah, but there's always a pushback on that with the CMs. I mean, the developers come with these type of
Well,
things.
there's a pushback on all the
Yeah.
on all the things. There's a pushback on scheduling and everything else. I mean, that's. I have a question of Gene,
Yes.
if I may.
Of course.
For today's times, as we sit here today in the Manhattan market, what would be the ideal number of rooms to put up for a successful hotel where you would want to build as many units as you could make a profit on?
The rule of thumb used to be that you had to have 100 rooms in a hotel to make money, and the more the better. And as I alluded to earlier, all of those formulas kind of went out the window. We did the smallest hotel we've done is 45 rooms, and I know there are smaller ones than that. But I think what we found is that if you're 100 to 150 rooms in Manhattan, you're likely to be full all of the time. And I think that in a funny way, you then can work back to sort of figure out what size property do you want to have. Unfortunately, what happens is that property ends up being small enough that your efficiency is very low, in which case your development cost is very high. So it's very hard to kind of arrive at a perfect formula. I've built 20,000 rooms in New York, and what I found is that the answer to that question changes maybe a couple times a year.
Yeah, that depends on the brand also. I mean, I'm involved in a hotel, for example, on 42nd Street. But it's one of those micro unit type hotels, and they have like 650 keys, okay? But they're a different type of operation. That's the type of operation that they've been very successful at. So in their particular case, they're also at a high occupancy level with a large amount of rooms. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about land prices. And obviously, it depends on what area you're talking about. But John, how do you see the prices of land in general? How are they trending right now?
Well, they went up to about a year ago or 6 months ago. And what I was looking at, they were going higher and higher and higher. I think it's a little bit of a pullback. That a lot of people don't want, if they're investing their own hard work money versus investing investors' money,
Somebody else's money.
guess what? You're a little bit more careful. And, you go out there and pay a big number for land based on how much you could develop, and by the time you get around developing it, well, you're in for a ton of money.
Yes. How are you finding the land prices, Gene?
Yeah, I think land prices have gone down. They were going up year after year. I think almost everybody was surprised to see numbers of 1,000 plus a square foot for development sites. And there are properties that changed hands at those numbers. They've retreated a fair amount, and again, it's location specific. They've retreated for hotels, they've retreated for residential, they've retreated for multi-use. And I think that that was sort of a necessary thing. It was, in a way, necessary for a correction to the market. We don't like when things go down, but sometimes it's not only inevitable, it's in the best interest in the long run.
And I'll put that to you, Frank, because you're obviously always churning numbers, for clients. But one of the things that obviously takes place when you have high land prices is that when you add the cost of land, the cost of financing, the hard costs, soft costs, etc., that sometimes a particular product just becomes impossible to build. In other words, can you just touch on that for? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there is a certain point at which you can't build it at a certain number. Smaller buildings will have much higher square foot prices, and sometimes the clients don't understand this. But you still have 2 stairs, you still have an elevator, and if there's a small footplate, the cost goes up. And then there becomes the question of, well, we should go non-union. Now, true enough, non-union may give you a 15% plus or minus savings, 20% maybe, but when you factor in the land cost, when you factor in all the other soft costs, I think actually it was Minskoff that did a big study on that, and it was only a 6% difference. And if there are any delays, as interest rates go up, that 6% could be eaten up in no time.
Right.
So, we're always challenged with what's the right number. We're now going open shop. Most of the city is doing open shop. So we can get better prices than Old Union. And I think the gap is closing. And particularly on very difficult or high-end buildings, the gap gets smaller and smaller. So we're always faced with that. But given the land cost, given the cost of construction, it's hard, as John said, to come up with a number that makes sense where an investor with his own money wants to invest. We look at small deals, we'd love to find small deals, but for the last 2 or 3 years, we just could not see anything that was worth the risk. Land prices were too high.
We talked about condos versus rentals, and what drives some of this stuff is obviously the costs. There are particular costs that you cannot do a rental, period. In other words, it just doesn't work. And in many cases, you have to go to something that may work, like a condo, or may work again, like a hotel type building. But John, when you're thinking about condo versus rental, what's your thought process in terms of one or the other? I mean, philosophically, you prefer rentals?
I've always done rentals.
Yes.
I'm in it for the long run. I have young kids. I'm in it for them. And if you're doing a marginal deal, then you look at condos.
That's exactly right.
So that way you bail out some of your own money. And then it depends on allocation. If half the building is condo and half the building is rental, how do you allocate costs? And that's when you need a good Jewish accountant.
Let's switch gears a little bit, and talk about architecture. Okay, and all of you have obviously been involved in looking at that. John, what's your take? You're a developer, obviously, and you hire architects. What are the type of things that you're looking for in terms of how you want the building to look, or what does it have to say to you, or how do you select an architect?
I consider myself a little bit of a visionary. I want to build it for the right price, but I want to be proud of what I build. So when I look at something, I want to say, wow, I want to live there. No. And so I make the decision. I'm going to
talk to you after this. That sounds great.
Well, that's the truth. I mean, it's got to be beautiful. It's got to be something you're proud of. Hey, look at Donald Trump. He's built some beautiful buildings. I mean, the vision of Trump Tower, how long ago did he build it? 30 years ago? It's 30 years already. And it still looks brand new. So,
John, isn't it beauty is in the eyes of the beholder?
well, it depends if you have to wear glasses.
All right, but I mean, that's what maybe the place that you want to live may not be the place that other people want to live. So I mean, it's a very judgmental thing.
If you can't be proud of it, don't build it.
Well, let me ask another question. Obviously, part of what this market is all about, all markets are all about, is to differentiate yourself. And let's talk a little bit about the architecture. John, in your mind, besides the building, looking good for you and wanting to live there, it does have a value for a building to have a look that's also impresses other people in terms of whether they're rental buildings or condo buildings. And people obviously want the same thing that you want. They also want to be in a building that they're proud of. When people visit them, for example, that their lobbies look a certain way, that their elevators look a certain way, that they are...
Yeah, you want the wow effect.
Exactly.
That if you just moved into a new building, what we've been talking about the last few weeks, in Coney Island.
Yes.
And I just moved into Coney Island. If it looks like a tenement,
Yeah, forget it.
forget about it.
Right.
I mean, I don't care what price you sell it for. It's no good.
Gene, obviously clients come to you. They want a certain look. They want a certain feel. You put a building together. Tell us about your experiences with some of these clients.
A lot of clients that don't have a long track record have a long wish list of things they want. And good architecture is very high on the list. They want all kinds of features. They want it to be unique. They want it to be better than everybody else's building. Then something funny happens, which is we get to a phase called value engineering. And then we find out that a lot of these people care a lot more about the budget than about the architecture. And I try not to get caught up in that because we understand that the project not only is meant to look good, but it's not going to happen unless it makes sense. And so I try to start at the beginning with that, because I find that having a project that ends up with good architecture is a project where you understand what the economics of that are at the beginning, and that you can allocate the resources to be able to do what you want to do. And sometimes that means making a shorter wish list than you might want to have. And people like John, who've been through this a number of times, I think they understand that much better, and that conversation's a lot easier, but it still needs to happen. Otherwise, that stuff that looks great stays on paper.
Exactly. And Frank, that's the words that you always hear, value engineering. And that's your business, basically. That's what you do a lot of. Can you just go through the process of how you look at a project that maybe is a little bit too rich, and how you try to bring it in line and still give the client that vision?
Yeah, I think that what we'll do is try to find out what's important to the architect. I mean, if we see these reveals, we will work hard to get the reveals, but at some point we might just say, we won't say get rid of those stupid reveals.
Yeah, sometimes the architects are out of their minds, by the way.
We'll say we love those reveals, you just can't have them all. But if you really go through an exhaustive process of trying to do the job for the budget, then usually the architect, owner, and everyone are in alignment, and they realize it can't be done. But you got to work hard to get to that point. And I always say, when you get to the point they want value engineering, and I do that, and a developer will say, "Come on, you gotta do more." And
The price is too high.
Price is too high. I said, "Okay, I understand. You don't want VE, you want DE, design elimination. Let's go. I'll take 20% out of this job in 20 minutes. But you got to tell me what you want." So we try to avoid getting to that DE phase, but sometimes it's necessary. And the best way to avoid that is bringing in, I'm not trying to promote, we're very busy, but bring in a CM early and get a schematic budget from him.
Right.
If you do the correct schematic budget, you're in great shape. You lose it in the schematics, and you're going to
I
trouble down the line.
think what happens many times, and you're absolutely right, Frank. I think what happens many times is people are not working towards a budget. They don't do a conceptual budget up front that everybody buys into, whether it's the owner, the architect, and everybody else. And then as the design is taking place, you're actually monitoring against that budget. And if that budget is being blown, you say to the owner, hey, this budget is being blown. Mr. Architect, cut back on some of the things, the original parameters that we talked about. If you don't do that, obviously the process goes wild, and then you have to go claw back, some of the monies that the client just doesn't have for this particular project. Are there any special trends that are happening architecturally? In other world, what's happening in the world of architecture, Gene? What's happening out there?
I was going to answer that and to relate to what was being said. There's been a design inflation, I guess I would call it, which is a sense that what people want to have as a product in a project has increased tremendously. And I'm talking about the renter or the buyer. And even as prices seem to have tempered and gone down, what people expect to have has gone way up, both in terms of finishes, materials, features, appliances, etc. And also in terms of amenities in a project and the look of a project. So if you're spending more money on the facade, and more money for non-income producing space, and more money per square foot on finishing out condos or rental units, and you're collecting less money for it. But maybe all of this is not true then. So I think what we're seeing is that it's a quality versus quantity kind of situation right now. So it's not so much about a specific kind of look. I think it's a feeling of luxury, that people are feeling like they're getting something really extraordinary. And I think that that's going to have to shift because the numbers are shifting against it.
Yeah, because one of the things that that was trending actually was that everything was going towards condo-type finishes. Even on the rental side, you had some pretty high-end appliances, kitchens, all the rest of it.
All the rental projects are called rental with condo features, and I think that when you look at the economics of that, that's a tough proposition. And I think you're going to see some pushback because I think this idea of super luxury is not really how most of us live. And I think that you're going to start to see projects that are a little bit more spare, a little bit more minimalist. And I think that people are going to find out they're attracted to these kinds of spaces because the price tag, and also because I think they're going to get rid of a lot of this kind of visual clutter.
But I think technology, I mean, when you look at the tuned mass dampers now that you have in these skyscrapers, they allow you to shoot for the stars and not feel the sway when you're in there. I mean, just look at 57th Street with all these tall buildings. I think, engineering technology has allowed these buildings to get taller and taller. I personally don't like what it's doing to the skyline, but it's a reality. You just have these very, very tall, slender buildings popping up all over the city.
Do you see an acceptance now of smaller and smaller units, Gene? In other words, are the square footages of apartments shrinking?
Apartments are shrinking. Interestingly, they wanted more space, and now some of the Brooklyn units are actually costing more than a lot of Manhattan neighborhoods, and people still don't want to have less square footage. So I wouldn't say it's a unilateral kind of trend.
It depends.
Yeah,
but in the city, maybe.
Apartments have shrunk. I think they will continue to shrink. There's a push towards doing micro units, and I think you'll start to see some of those. Hotel rooms, as you were talking about, have also continued to shrink. At one point, we're doing really small hotel rooms of 250 square feet. That's considered very large right now. So I think that all of these numbers have moved, and it's really in relationship to what people can afford.
Frank, we talked on costs. How do you see the costs trending now? Do you see the market getting a little bit better, worse?
No, I think it's flattened. And
It's flattened.
I do think with the, there's been a real push for non-union work. There's been some really good non-union contractors.
Yes. Some of them are sitting in this audience, by the way.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And if they can...
Call Frank.
If they end up doing these jobs properly and, closing them all out, it's going to be good. I mean, there's going to be a real competition. The unions are now allowing open shop. Most of the larger CMs are doing open shop work. So that's also helping to bring the prices down a bit. And the demand is not there. I mean, there's not, it used to be you'd have to wait 4 or 5 months to get a concrete contractor.
Yes.
Because you just didn't have the capacity. So I do think you're seeing a flattening out, which is a good thing.
And how about the labor market? You see it's in pretty good shape right now?
Yeah, there's still enough people. You got the union, non-union, and I think it's pretty healthy.
Lou, I just want to.
Yeah, please.
I want to go back
Yeah, go back.
to the prior subject.
Yes.
And I'm not familiar with Gene's buildings and design, but generally, I know the city like the back of my hand, and I'm talking as a layperson, not as a lawyer. And I see so much construction that goes up with residences and commercial, that's cookie cutter. It's cookie cutter, and it's not distinctive, and it's not impressive at all.
Yeah, but it's
to
kind
me.
of tough. It's kind of tough with the zoning that exists
Well,
to,
I mean,
to do a lot of crazy things
I
here.
take a look at Hudson Yards. I think they're doing an immensely good job down there. And I think their architecture is very unique. And it's to me, at least, it's very impressive. But you know what? I've been in where is it? Where they're looking at the Gaudi architecture of the cathedral, and somebody says, looks like a bunch of mud thrown together. And I've seen people look at the Frank Gehry building on opposite the piers, a fantastic building, and they say, oh, you can see right through it. So you know what? It's very hard to judge aesthetics. When it's like going to a museum. Some people will like Picasso's and others won't.
Well, a lot of it, I think, has to do also with how you market any building, how you brand it, etc. You want to talk to that, Gene, a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think it's this notion of taste is a very elusive thing, and it is in the eye of the beholder. And you know, this country notoriously has not talked a lot or taught a lot about architecture and the aesthetics of architecture. And I think that in Europe, for many years, we've been seeing modern buildings going up that are extremely well designed, that are considered to be aesthetic masterpieces that would never have been built in this country because there was no market for that. The general public's perception is this just not what we want. That's changing. I think what you're seeing more and more modern buildings. We've had some very good architects from other places, significantly a lot of them from Europe, coming and doing buildings here that I think have redefined that. And I think that now having a building which is sort of a geometrically modern, minimalist building is sexy. And I think we've had quite a few of these. We continue to have more of these. And I think that it kind of builds on itself, that I think that as people are seeing these buildings, not only seeing that they're successful, but seeing that they like them, you're starting to see more and more of these. And what's being built at Hudson Yards, those kinds of buildings wouldn't have been put up 10 years ago.
Yes. Also, what we're seeing is heights that we never would have seen in the past, and a lot of it has to do with the technology. For example, of reinforced concrete, with buildings going to heights that in the past, based on the technologies of those days, we couldn't have done. What do you guys think about John? What do you think about these buildings that are going up 1,000 feet or more?
Well, I think they're beautiful buildings, and I think they have great views. It depends what your cost factors are,
Right.
and there's just so many people that will buy an apartment that's $7,000 a square foot or $6,000 a square foot. I mean, I did a favor to a friend of mine. He wanted to say, oh, I got a traditional Fifth Avenue apartment where the rooms are tremendous and you look at some of those rooms on the 50th floor, 60th floor, 70th floor. Great view, but doesn't look like 5,000 feet,
Because it's not. And it basically depends on where they take the measurement from.
Yeah.
Your final thoughts, guys, on how you see, one by one, how you see the trend, not so much for this year, obviously this year is gone, but what do you see in 18 and 19 in terms of the marketplace? John, you want to start with that?
I think Brooklyn is going to continue to rise. I think Queens is only going to rise along that coast, not deeper into Queens. I don't think it's going to happen as much. And I think the Bronx, if you can get good numbers in areas where there's good transportation and they can maintain safety, those are the factors, safety and good transportation, then I think the Bronx could be the next borough.
Yes, Gene.
I think people have been watching nervously the market and thinking things are starting down, things are going further down. And I think that this sort of small period, which has been maybe a period of glut and a small downturn, seems just like a small inflection point at the moment. And I think that the market's actually going to continue to be strong, and I think that there's still going to be a lot of opportunities. I've been hearing for several decades now that we're running out of sites. That has not happened, and I think that what John is saying about the other 4 boroughs is going to happen increasingly. I think we've reached what I think of as a critical mass in a lot of these areas that, irrespective of what happens to the market, a lot of these neighborhoods are going to continue to grow and to outperform the market.
Peter, tell us not only about that particular question, but also the legal aspects. How do you see the trajectory going?
I can predict the future as far as legal issues are concerned, and all I can tell you is that you should do almost anything to avoid. I make my money, first of all, being a litigator. I'm a paid gladiator, okay? But I'll tell you that the thing that any smart client should do, and if he's not getting this advice from his attorney, he has the wrong attorney. Get this thing resolved outside of court, outside of arbitration, even outside of mediation. Be business people. That's what the contract is usually between two business people, whether it be an architect and an owner, whether it be a contractor and an owner, or contractor, subcontractor. Because the cost of litigation, arbitration today is going haywire. It's going haywire, and you really should do almost anything to avoid it. And just remember, there's an old saying that long before I started practicing law, a bad settlement is better than the best litigation, and that's a truism. So all my clients are so feisty, and they're gonna sue the socks off everybody, and it's not the right approach.
Frank?
Yeah, I think that, we'll continue to, we'll have ups and downs like we've always had for decades, but as John said, New York is the great place. America's the place. Any third world nation starts to make money, they all want to put their money in the safest haven, and that's America. Location, first America, and then Manhattan, and then the city.
Well,
so I see a continued influx of European and worldwide money that's going to keep this place great. Let's just hope it continues.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, the more unstable the world becomes, okay, the more the money heads towards places like New York, for example, because people need somewhere, not so much even to to build up on their wealth, but just to preserve their wealth. So many of them are obviously coming into New York. I'd like everyone to just give a round of applause for a great panel. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for coming to
MGTV USA. Οι δραστηριότητες της ελληνοαμερικανικής κοινότητας με βίντεο και πλήρες ρεπορτάζ. Επισκεφτείτε την ιστοσελίδα μας mgtvusa.com.